name is Yannick. Welcome to our Angular course. My name is Yannick and I'm your instructor throughout this course. I'm a web developer for almost 10 years now, mainly focusing on web development using Angular and ASP.NET Core. Now, before we dive right into Angular, before you start creating your first project, let's define a goal together. Your number one goal should be to complete this course. Why? Because you will get a certificate from Udemy if you finish this course, right? That's the first thing that you want to have. And secondly, if you finish this course, we can ensure that you have all the necessary Angular skills that you really need. So always keep that goal in mind, right? Finish the course, get the certificate and become a web developer. And I am here to support you. So I'm not only teaching the stuff inside the course, I'm also happy to help in the questions and answers section at Udemy. In addition to all of that, I've added exercises and quizzes to the course so that you can really test your knowledge. All of this will help you to stay motivated to finish the course and grab the certificate. So thank you for enrolling in our course. You are here because you want to master Angular, and you will do so. Let's get started. In the next lesson, let's turn you into a professional Angular web developer. Welcome to the very first day of this Angular course. Today we will install Angular and set up the general development environment, and then we will build the very first application, an appointment web application. You will learn about components, data binding, the Angular CLI, the command line interface, and the general development process in Angular. So I hope that you're excited. Let's get started. Let's dive right in. Welcome to the first real lecture of this course. Let's explore Angular in this very short presentation. Angular is a platform or tool that you can use to build web applications. So let's assume that we have a browser here. It could be Chrome, but could also be any other kind of browser. Inside of that browser window, we can see our Angular application. But what is inside of an Angular application? There are three building blocks in general. The first building block is the component. We want to keep it as easy as possible for now. A component is what the user can actually see and interact with. There's also data binding happening between the input fields, for example, that we display to a user, and the data that gets stored, and the component's associated code and storage. Please notice that we cannot only have a single component, we can have many components. Usually, you would create one component for functionality. So let's say we run an employee management system. Then we could have one component to list all the employees, and we could also have another component for creating an employee, for example. So we would have those two components. Just keep in mind, we can have many components, not only a single one. Next up, we got services. And services are here to handle our data. We use them to communicate with REST APIs to load data via a database, and then they can spread all of those loaded data and information to all of our components. No worries, we will get to services for sure in detail. And then for encapsulation, we use modules so that our entire application is nice and well structured. So let's just assume that inside of our application, we are not only handling employees, we are also handling invoices, for example. Then we could have like tons of components, some of them for the employee management, some of them for the invoices. And then we could create a module for employee and a module for invoices. And each of those modules has, well, declared or defined those components. So in easy words, we use modules to structure our Angular application in a nice and easy to understand way. Alrighty, we are almost done, but there are two more things to really mention. Angular, or our Angular application, is a so-called single page application, right? You can see that on screen. So in that way, when we first load the page, we load it one time, the entire application, but then afterwards, as soon as we go to another website in our application, so we change the route, for example, or we add something to our application, only the changes are getting updated. In that way, we heavily reduce the loading times because we do not have to reload the entire application all the time. We only update what's getting changed, right? And therefore, we also reduce the server load because we don't have to update so much data. And finally, our Angular application runs in a web server. So if we run it locally, it's called the local host. So our Angular application would run in a local host. Then we can enter this local host URL inside of our browser to get access to the Angular application. Now, in order to get started with Angular, to start the web server, to create an Angular project and to host it, we need the Angular CLI, the command line interface, right? And this is a Node package, and therefore we have to install Node.js, which is the way on how you can run JavaScript and TypeScript on web servers, right? This is why we need it. And in addition to that, we need npm, but that one comes automatically with Node.js to install the Angular CLI and all the packages that we need to get started with the Angular development. So next up, let's install Node.js and the code editor so that we can create our very first Angular project. Let's take a look at what you are going to build in this section. You will build entirely from scratch an appointment app. So by building this application, you will learn the most fundamental things about Angular: components, data binding, and so on. We can make use of this application to create new appointments basically. Let's say go to the mall, then we can pick a date right here and we can add it to the list. We can see all appointments here, we can remove appointments, and if we reload the page, all of the appointments are still here because we are storing them inside of the local storage of the browser. So, are you ready to get started? Perfect. See you on the next lesson. Now, in order to create an Angular application, we need to install, Node.js and npm and the Angular CLI. But if you are on a run or if you cannot set up a real development environment right now, you can also follow along with Angular development in the browser using stackblitz.com. You can simply go to that URL. You can also find the URL attached to this lecture for sure, and then you can simply pick Angular. But I have to say that I would always recommend using a default development setup, right? So install Node.js on your local machine and then use a real code editor like Visual Studio Code instead. But as I said, if you are in a hurry and if you cannot set up a real development environment now, you can also use StackBlitz. So simply click on Angular. This will set up an Angular application. But again, I only recommend this for experienced developers, right? And only for those who cannot set up a development environment on the local machine. Alright, as you can see, our Angular application here works. So if you want to use StackBlitz, you can do that. Now we will move on to the next lecture to set up our local development environment. If we want to run Angular applications, or if we even want to create them, we need Node.js and the Node package manager. This is not optional, so if you want to create projects on your local machine, which is what I highly recommend, you have to install Node.js. So please go to nodejs.org. And then simply install the latest LTS version, which is LTS long-term support, right? So for me, this is version 18, for example, but you can pick the latest version that you can find right here. So simply click on that link, it will download the installer, and then simply go ahead, follow along with that installer, install Node.js on your machine, and then you're already good to go. Now, once that's done, so please go ahead and do that now, and once that's done, open up a command line. In order to open up such a console, you can simply go to the search bar, right? It really depends on your operating system, but any prompt or command line will do the job. So simply go to the search bar, write down prompt or CMD or whatever to open up a console or a terminal, right? And then write down node-v, hit enter, and you should be able to see your Node version. Make sure that you do not get an error here. You should see any kind of version. For me, it's version 16. It could also be version 18, 19 or whatsoever. But as long as you do not get an error, we can assume that you have installed Node.js successfully, which is very good. Awesome. So that's the first part, installing Node.js, right? So now we can close that one here. For sure, we need a code editor so that we can write some code for our Angular applications. I mean, if you want to, you can use the clean editor which comes from Windows or Linux or Mac, but I bet you don't want to do that. So in this course we will make use of Visual Studio Code, which is a very modern and often used web development IDE, so integrated development environment, code editor basically, right? So please make sure that we are using Visual Studio Code, not Visual Studio. It is Visual Studio Code, very important. And then you can simply go to that URL, code.visualstudio.com. It's also attached to this lecture. The same applies for the Node.js URL for sure. And then you can download it for your operating system. We can download it for Windows. We also got some versions for macOS, Linux, and all of that, right? So simply download the installer for your operating system and then install Visual Studio Code. We do not have to do it together. Really just open up the installer. It will walk you through the installation process, right? And then afterwards, you should be able to open up Visual Studio Code. So I will do that now. So after the installation process, I simply opened up Visual Studio Code and you should see something like this too. Maybe you've got a nice welcome screen. I've got that disabled already. And now we are good to go to, well, first of all, install the Angular CLI and then create our very first Angular project to start with the Angular development. Alrighty, so let's get started in the next lesson. To finish the setup of our development environment, we finally have to install the Angular CLI. CLI is command line interface. We can use the CLI for some nice comments to create an Angular project to run or serve the Angular application, but also to do everyday stuff like creating components, services, modules, TypeScript files, and so on. So this is definitely something that you want to install or you have to install it. So you can see weekly downloads, 2.8 million, quite a lot, right? So install, you can see npm I for install, add Angular CLI. Don't forget the @ sign right here. Now we can copy that. And npm is the Node package manager. Now, as you can maybe remember from the last lecture, we have installed Node.js. And when you install Node.js, you automatically install the Node package manager. So we can use the Node package manager to install several tools. We will install different tools throughout this course, but for now the Angular CLI will be enough. So go ahead and open up another terminal. Inside of this terminal or command prompt here, let me just zoom in a bit, there we go. We can now execute this code. So npm, let's say Node package manager, I for install, you can also write down install, add Angular/CLI. Now before you hit enter, this will install the latest version or the latest stable version at least, right? You can do that, but if you want to follow along with a specific version, which is what I recommend, right now it is version 16, and I'm working on this course basically all the time to update it, right? So please make sure that you use the version that I do. You can use another version if you like. So if there's version 18 or whatever and you want to use that, please go ahead. But I highly recommend that you use the version that I'm doing. You can see the latest version is version 16.1.6. This is the version that we will use, but basically as long as it is version 16, it should be fine. So add Angular/CLI, add, and now we can specify the version. It will be 16.1.6. So add 16.1.6, right? And we want to install this package globally. So globally on our machine. So go ahead and add the flag, so _ location equals to global. Take a look here, write it down exactly like this, npm install add Angular/CLI at 16.1.6 with the location flag set to global. Great. And then make sure that you use _ here, and then finally hit enter to install the Angular CLI. Alrighty, so that worked fine. You can now see added one package, right? And please notice that you can find this comment also attached to this lecture. Great, so now we got the Angular CLI installed. Now let's find out which version of